series in the book of Hebrews. We finished that last year. And so I'm just doing a couple of topical things until I get guidance on what we can, what series we can start up on Wednesday night again. And so what I'd like to look at this evening is this idea of storms in our lives. Storms are going to come, and how we can deal with them. And in Mark chapter 4, and starting in verse number 35, we have this passage. Mark chapter 4, verse 35, "In the same day when the even was come, he saith unto them, Let us pass over unto the other side. When they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship, and there were also with him other little ships." I thought it was interesting in verse number 36, they took him even as he was in the ship. And the him there's got to be referring to Jesus Christ. They took him as he was. Now, how was he? He was peopled out, wasn't he? He had just got done feeding the multitudes, just went up into the mountain, had a little short time of prayer, and he says, we're going to go to the other side. And then, of course, in verse 36, when he had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was. Well, I want to talk about that for a moment. When we talk about the boat, the Lord got into that ship as it was, but also as he was. That little ship was probably smelly from fishing, probably showed wear and tear. It definitely wasn't a pristine, perfect boat. And we as Christians, like that boat, are not really pristine, and some of us are smelly, aren't we? I had my shower this week. I choose my shower days to coincide with church days for your benefit. You're welcome. But we as this boat, imperfect, probably have some nicks, some dings, probably some wear spots, maybe a couple of leaks here and there. Not a perfect boat. But it says in that verse, they took him even as he was. Now, when we receive Christ, what kind of a Christ do we receive? What kind of Christ do we receive? Don't we receive a perfect, pristine, sinless, all-powerful, all-knowing, everywhere present at the same time? Isn't that the Jesus that we accept? And aren't you glad that he'll inhabit our little boats as they are, as we are? And so as we're talking about this account, as we're going down through it, let's kind of make that correlation. We might be like the boat, and we, like that boat, have Jesus Christ in us. Now, thank God these guys had Jesus Christ in them. And then it says at the end of the verse, and there were also with him other little ships. Verse 37, there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. Have you guys ever got beaten up? Have you ever had a trial come up like a storm? Now, the storms in the Sea of Galilee are notorious for being sudden storms and being violent storms. And they would just come up at a moment's notice. And like it says here in verse number 37, it just beat into the ship. Have you ever had a storm come up and beat you up? I have. Verse number 38, and he, again this is Jesus, was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Now, in another account, who was the one that gave Jesus that pillow? I believe it was Peter that gave Jesus that pillow. As soon as Peter, James, and John stepped onto the boat, they were home, weren't they? They were fishermen. They were master fishermen. They weren't going to let some landlubber tell them what to do on the ship. And so they said, here, Jesus, you just got done talking to and feeding all of those people. Take this pillow, go in the back of the boat. We got it. And then this storm comes up. And then they ran up to him like little girls screaming, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Three characteristics of a storm that comes up. I already mentioned one, they're sudden. Storms that come without any warning at all seem to hit with double force. Have you ever gotten hit by a trial and it hit with such ferocity that you were taken back? Maybe you're even knocked off of your spiritual feet. It hit so hard. The second common characteristic, they're sudden, number one. Number two, they're unmerciful. Have you ever had a storm stop just because you asked it to stop? I'm scared of the lightning. Could you please stop? You're taking up tiles on my roof. Can you please stop? Have you ever had a storm stop just because you whined at it? You cried at it? You cried out at it? They're relentless. They're unmerciful. By the way, they show no respect to persons either, do they? I'm reading of an account now. Tornadoes went through North Carolina. And my Hebrew instructor, their pastor lives in the town that got hit by the tornado. And the pastor was going down through his neighborhood after the thing had passed and saw homes destroyed, saw homes just wiped off the map. And he got to his house, and you know what he found? It was damaged, just like everybody else's. It can be unmerciful and shows no respect to person. Now, on what Lauren said, I have heard and I saw. You guys remember the fires in Hawaii? Fires wiped out whole neighborhoods, and there would be homes of Christians whose homes were not touched. You would see home destroyed, home destroyed, home destroyed, home not touched, home destroyed, home destroyed. It was a miracle. But in this case, with the tornadoes, this pastor found out that his house was destroyed just like everybody else's. Storms show no respect to people, of persons. The third thing, they change our perspective. Have you ever had a storm come in and you found out how small you were, how powerless you were? Kind of changes our perspective. And so they're perspective changers. Since Jesus knew the storm was coming, and did Jesus know the storm was coming? If you listen to the pastor of this church when he preaches through this account in a different way, he believes that Jesus had a little smirky smile on his face and brought that storm up. Because the disciples gave him a pillow and said, go to the back of the boat, we don't need you. And so the pastor of this church preaches, this storm came up because Jesus called it up. But do you think Jesus knew that was going to happen? Absolutely. He knows everything. If he knew it was coming, why didn't he wait? Well, two things. He called that storm for the disciples' sake. Number two, he called that thing for the disciples' sake. Did you hear the emphasis change there? I wrote this down. Perhaps because storms do for us what glassy seas cannot. How many of you have gone through or are going through good times and you panic? Nobody does that. Yeah, nobody does that. When things are going good, yeah, well, we might be thinking, well, when's it going to end? But we're really thinking, man, it's going good. Not like in a storm. When a storm is in our life and a trial is in our life, aren't we down on our knees begging and screaming and crying and all of that to God? We don't do all of that when we have glassy seas. And so maybe, storms come into our lives because they can do for us what glassy seas cannot. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 and 13 say, Beloved, think it not strange concerning fiery trial, which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. We ought to not think when fiery trials come in or storms come into our lives, it's like, well, how come it's hitting me? As if it was some strange thing. But rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when in his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. So when trials come, when storms come, and you notice I'm using the word when, not if, but when they come, don't think to yourself, well, how come it's happened to me? God, don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I do for you? It's not some strange thing. We need trials because sometimes that wakes us up. I kind of alluded to this before. The reality is we're a weak and fragile people. We can't make it on our own. We desperately need God, not just in storms, but all the time. When times are good, we need to be crying out to God. Probably the cry ought to be, God, keep it like this. God, keep it good. God, keep it. I don't want to be in a storm. Anybody want to be in a storm? Anybody like being in trials? Anybody? I'd love it when God slams me with a thunderstorm. Yeah, me either. Back in Mark chapter 4 and verse 39, he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? They came up in verse number 38 and was crying at him, Don't you care that we by the way, don't you like how they call him master there? I think it's interesting they call him master there. Before they're giving him a pillow because they were the masters. Master fishermen. They were on the boat. They lived on that boat. They knew every inch of the Sea of Galilee. They were even familiar with the sudden storms of the Sea of Galilee. So this must have been a storm of storms. For them to come back crying, saying, Master. Carest thou not that we perish? And just to emphasize the point, he arose and rebuked the wind, said, Peace be still. Weren't they a little more afraid after he said that than before he said that? You read the other accounts, they were so afraid. They were affrighted. Because as soon as he said, Peace be still, the sea calmed to nothing. Who is this that the wind and the seas obey him? The thought on this passage and the storms in our lives are this. He does not promise protection from the storms, but he does promise help through the storms. He does promise to be our protection through the storm, and our strength through the storm, and our refuge through the storm, our lighthouse, our strong castle. Who's the only one that can really help us in those times? but that God. Who's the only one that can help us but Him? And so, guys, folks, when we hit these storms, and they're sudden storms, and they're unmerciful storms, and they hit with such ferocity that it changes our perspective, and we get probably a realistic look at who we are, we need to remember who's at our right hand and who's in the boat with us. Who's in our imperfect boat? Who's in our marred boat? But that omnipotent, omniscient, eternal, omnipresent God of the universe. Basically the one that creates the storms in the first place. Now, that's the storms that God creates. Do you ever make your own dumb storms? Anybody, do you ever make your own storm? I'm in a trial because I'm stupid. All right, this doesn't apply to that. You're stupid. I'm sorry. That's the collective you. Right? We're stupid. There's some times when I'm stupid. And I'm in a trial because of me. That's not what we're talking about here. These trials we're talking about, they come from God, and it's for our good. It's for our growth. He is our help in that. Now, when you cause your own storm, He'll come along and help you out of it. And call you stupid along the way. You shouldn't have done that, thou fool. Have you heard those words? Feeble-minded, different words like that. But this storm and these kinds of storms that we're talking about are the ones that God puts into our lives, and He gives us a way through them. Not out of them, but through them. And so ask God to help you through it. My prayer now when I go into trials, and it doesn't matter if they're self-inflicted or not, my prayer is always, Lord, what is it that you need me to learn? I want to learn it as soon as I can so I can get out of this. That's my prayer request. Lord, I know I'm in a trial. What do you need me to learn? By the way, I don't want to miss the lesson, so I have to go through this trial again. Any of us done that? I'm doing this. How come I'm in this same storm? Well, you didn't learn the lesson in the first place. And so our prayer request ought to be, Lord, help me to learn what you have for me and help me through it. And pray for those words, peace be still. Lord, please say those words in this storm. Peace be still. All right, questions or comments?